actuator stroke limit, actuator simulation, MATLAB simulation, all these things you have completed, I hope. Anybody has any doubt? So it's good. Mr. Abhilash has clarified all your doubts, and now you are expert in simulating dynamical system as far as electromechanical actuation is concerned. Today we are going to start a new type of actuation system. It is called electro-hydraulic actuation system. If you verify different actuation systems of aerospace vehicles like rockets or aeroplanes, fighter aircrafts, etc., you can see that these two types of actuators are being used depending on the power requirement and also as a part of the history of development. In general, when the force capacity is something less than 10-ton force, we can go for electromechanical actuator. But if the force capacity is beyond 10-ton force, then it is better to go for electro-hydraulic actuation. This is a general rule. In VSSC, various actuation systems for PSLV nowadays, electromechanical actuators are used. GSLV also, because earlier electro-hydraulic were there, that is gradually converted electromechanical. For GSLV Mark III purpose, one of the stage, that is S200 booster stage, is now also using electro-hydraulic, but it also will be converted to electromechanical shortly, because man rating requirements actually demands better reliability. The reliability point of view, electromechanical actuation systems have less components and better reliable. Another thing is that electromechanical actuation systems are solid state actuation system. There is no liquid media or gaseous media. Because of that, what happens is the storage life of actuation system components is indefinite. You can store to any number of years. Only problem is some permanent magnet elements that should not get demagnetized while it is simply stored. That's the only problem. Otherwise, there is no problem as long as the bearings doesn't take any rust. Only thing, it should not be stored on seashore, etc., like Tumba. There, the problem is the salt water, humid atmosphere. Because of the presence of the salty water, metallic components, if it is a little bit of impurity, that will get corroded. That is one problem. Otherwise, there is no problem of storage life or electromechanical. Anyway, today we are going to start the discussion on electro-hydraulic actuation system. And apart from doing another type of actuation system, because you have to actually get exposure to different types of simulation and modeling practice also. That is also very important. Hence, now you are familiar with modeling a electromechanical motor powered by DC torque motor. Now I am going to handle another situation where the prime mover element is a hydraulic motor. So you will study how fluid related devices and systems can be modeled. That will give you another experience in modeling a generic dynamical system. Let me go to the screen shared mode. mathematical modeling of electrohydraulic actuation system. Only some course code, material, etc. Okay, you don't worry. Material content is same. First, we will start with orifice flow modeling. This you might have studied this equation in your high school or plus two. Anyway, we can revise it. First part of the electrohydraulic actuator system modeling is study the orifice flow equation. You see this concentrate on this. This is a pipe. This is a pipe. This incoming pipe. There is an outgoing pipe. In between, these two pipes are joined through a restricted area orifice. It's a the area here I denote by A naught, A0, a suffix 0. That is quite small compared to the area of the pipe. And there is a significant pressure for the fluid media here. Because of that, what will happen is the fluid in the upstream that will flow through this narrow area that will get focused like this. And this flow is called orifice flow. There are different types of flow mechanisms are there: laminar flow, orifice flow, turbulent flow, etc. That depends on a term called Reynolds number. We will not go into details of that fluid flow mechanics. We are only focusing on the essential part of that fluid mechanism, which is required to model our valves, because electrohydraulics actual systems are controlled by flow control valves. The flow control valves basically make use of the principle of orifice flow equation to control the flow. That is why we are studying orifice flow equation. And while this flow is focused or injected through this orifice, it will not simply spread out after this physical orifice. It will continue to further focus towards another narrower area. And this area is, this particular location is known as vena contracta. I have written here, vena contracta. Beyond vena contracta, there won't be any change of pressure. Till vena contracta, there is a pressure reduction is there from P1 to the pressure P2. At P2, pressure is vena contracta. Beyond that, this flow simply spread out because everywhere same pressure is. Because of this mechanism, what happens is pressure is always associated with something called potential energy. Higher pressure means higher potential. And the potential energy is getting converted into kinetic energy, and hence the velocity of the stream that increases till vena contracta. After that, the velocity remains same. And the total pressure drop across the orifice, we measure from this P1 to P2 up to vena contracta, pressure is dropping. Thus, we can visualize this orifice as this portion. Even though physical orifice is only with respect to this narrow area, the actual flows is an effective orifice distributed over this area and finishes with, ends with the vena contracta. And we can write P1 is definitely greater than P2. A naught is the area of cross section of physical orifice here, and AV is the area of cross section of vena contracta. And the ratio AV by A naught is known as CD. Its name is discharge coefficient. Since A naught is always greater than AV, this will be a quantity which is less than 1. Normally, the actual value depends on the shape of this orifice. If the orifice is rectangle or square in shape, one value you'll get. If it is circular in shape, another value you'll get. And this CD, we cannot simply get through some analytic formula. We may have to go for empirical formulas based on computational fluid dynamics analysis. CD is less than 1. Downstream pressure gets settled at P2 at the Wiener contract. Now we are going to use an equation called Bernoulli's equation. You might have studied this equation. That is the equation which is the basic equation used for studying the fluid flow, fluid dynamics. One more assumption we make here, the upstream and downstream flows are on the same horizontal level, so that effect of acceleration due to gravity is insignificant. So we can write v square by 2 plus gz plus p by rho is a constant, where v is the velocity, that is fluid velocity, the stream velocity, g is the acceleration due to gravity, p is the pressure. So this is applicable to any side. For example, the upstream side, you can apply this equation. The velocity of the fluid in the upstream, that is v square by 2 plus gz, g into the height of this mean position above the ground level, plus p by rho. Here p is equal to p1. Rho is the density of fluid. C is a constant. Z is the height. It is applicable for any point on the streamline of inviscid, non-conductive, incompressible flow. 3 adjectives are there. That is, when you apply this formula, we assume that the viscosity of the fluid is negligible. Second, this is not a conductive flow. Next one is, it is incompressible. Fluid is not compressible. Assuming same height for upstream and downstream, then you can cancel one term. Gz can be cancelled. And C is same for both upstream and downstream. So only taking care of these two terms, equating with respect to both sides, P1 square by 2 plus P1 by rho equals V2 square by 2 plus P2 by rho. This is the fundamental equation that we use for deriving the orifice flow equation. And one more assumption, if the area prior to the area A0 is much larger than A0, that is this area, this is the area prior to A0. If this is much larger than A0, then V2 is much greater than V1. You can understand it. Here it's very wide. For example, if you see during rainy seasons, various sewage portion and all, or riverside, etc., you see. The flow rate across the river, that may be very small. But when the water is passing through a small canal, then you can, then only that flow rate will be visible. The reason is that the volumetric displacement of the fluid is same across different area cross section, but here whatever fluid is flowing per second crossing this area is same as the fluid crossing per second crossing this area, but this area is very small. That means the velocity, the volumetric displacement should be same. And how volumetric displacement is nothing but linear velocity multiplied by the area of cross section. So if area of cross section is small, linear velocity will be large. Hence, the velocity ratio will be inversely proportional to the area ratio, and hence you can say that V2 will be much, much greater than V1. And hence, one simplification we'll get. Here in this equation, we are using even the square of the velocity. So if V2 is much greater than V1, V2 square will be much, much greater than V1 square. And then you can neglect this and directly use this formula, and we can substitute V downstream velocity V square instead of V2 square. The same as V2 equals, that is, you take this to the side and this term to the other side. So you'll get 2 into a square root of 2 into P1 minus P2 divided by rho. So this is the equation. The downstream velocity is almost equal to square root of 2 delta P by rho, where delta P is the pressure drop across the orifice. So this is the formula that I am writing here. Hence, orifice flow rate is equal to Q equals. This is the linear flow only, translational flow, that multiplied by area of cross section is the volumetric flow rate or orifice flow rate. That is represented by capital Q equals AV into V. Whatever we are getting is at the vena contracta. So if you know the area of cross section of vena contracta multiplied by the linear velocity of the fluid, you will get the total flow rate through the orifice. That AV into V equals CD into A naught. Now A naught, in terms of A naught, we are substituting. That is AV is equal to discharge coefficient into A naught into square root of 2 delta P by rho, where delta P is the pressure drop across the orifice. Okay, this is one portion. Any doubts so far? Okay, no doubts. I think everybody is sleeping.
No, sir.
No, sir.
No,
Okay.
sir.
Ah, okay, you are not sleeping. Good. Now we are going to a mechanization portion. This much we are studying only a passive orifice. But our intention, I told, how we can make use of an orifice flow to make a flow control mechanism, how we can mechanize it. If you see, any doubt?
I have doubt. Yes, sir.
Please.
In the second time we use the Bernoulli equation for the point at which there is a vena contracta. So the pressure which we should use at that point should be the pressure due to that small volume, I guess. So why are we taking P2 instead? Because P2 is the pressure much farther than the vena contracta versus the pressure at the outward end of the pipe.
Okay, I had defined vena contracta itself in such a way that beyond vena contracta, there is no drop in pressure. Even though I have written P2 here, you can write P2 here, right at the vena contracta. Beyond that, there is no pressure reduction. Same pressure. That's why the flow is distributing like this. Till vena contracta only pressure drop is there. So P2 is applicable from vena contracta onwards, downstream.
Okay. So if I consider a cross section of that second region which passes through the vena contracta, then I can say that at each point on the cross section the pressure remains the same.
For this cross section you are telling? Here there is no difference. Beyond that, that's what it is. Actually, it is the pressure here, everywhere it is same. The flow is, that is why it is distributing like this. There is no difference. In the vena contracta, actually it is radially it is going out and filling the total downstream area. So up and down there is no problem. But till the time here, from up to that, the flow is coming and then dispersing. And another thing you should understand, this is when you consider this flow equation, it is not like our electrical circuit. All are associated with some sort of empirical model. So exactly when you pointing out there is a difference. What you are telling is correct. That is why if you simulate it through computational fluid dynamics, CFD technique, you can see that there is a field of pressure. What you're telling will be correct. And what we are approximating here is the integral effect of the entire thing and approximating by a reduced order equation. Hence, you have to take in that sense also. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So fluid is actually more tricky. We have to make use of a lot of empirical relationship, and empirical relationship we get through CFD techniques on the actual geometry. And this will be valid for certain pressure range. That's why there comes the so-called Reynolds number. So for different value ranges of Reynolds number, you will get different flow equation. If the Reynolds number is very small, you will get laminar flow. There is the viscosity effect will dominate. When you increase the pressure difference, you will get inertially dominated flow. There the viscosity effect will be negligible. Here, why we go for orifice flow is very important. If you go for laminar flow, one basic advantage is there won't be any square root relationship. You might have studied some equations called Poisson's equations and all, where the laminar flow is proportional to the pressure difference. It is not proportional to the square root of delta P. Flow is proportional to delta P. Then you may think that would have been a better mechanism to mechanize flow, controlled flow. Am I right? Why unnecessarily introducing a nonlinearity of square root? Anybody
Yes,
is having the doubt?
yes,
Then I will answer that also. Viscosity is a function of temperature. So when temperature changes, viscosity will change. If my memory is correct, viscosity will change as the fourth power of temperature. Then what will happen? Definitely this equation corresponding to the laminar flow will contain a viscosity coefficient. Then the flow equation will be dependent on temperature. Because of that, while the actuator is running, definitely the fluid temperature will go up and the flow equation will change. Hence, this total system will be a time varying or nonlinear system in that sense. I call it as time varying system because it is a function of temperature. Temperature is a function of fluid operation. Finally, the system bandwidth, the rise time, overshoot, all these things will change during the course of operation. While you test starting your actuation, it will have one overshoot. While you actuate through multiple cycles, the overshoot will change. Sometimes a stable system may become unstable. So all these things are very deteriorating with respect to actuator system performance. That is why even though this contains a square root sort of relationship, here only one temperature dependent parameter is the density of fluid. But the variation of fluid density with temperature is quite less, unlike gas. The thermal expansion of fluid is quite less. So this is the reason why we go for orifice flow mechanism to make a flow control valve. Okay.
sir.
Ah,
But in reality, the fluid will be, of course, viscid. So in that case, also the temperature dependence will be there. So how it will be different from the case of laminar flow?
Can you repeat once again?
I was saying that in reality, the fluid will have some viscosity, finite viscosity. So that is a temperature dependent quantity, as you have said. So how the effects will be different as compared to the laminar flow, or is it insignificant because of some reasons? Or yes, and what are they?
Here, the operating pressures of the actuators are quite large, so that the effect of viscous forces on flow rate is quite insignificant compared to the inertial effects. This is actually basically due to inertial effect. You can see that the potential energy due to the pressure is converted into kinetic energy. Here density is there. Okay. So this mechanism make use of the inertial flow. And at this pressure effect levels, the laminar forces, laminar flow force, the viscosity effects are quite insignificant because we are talking about large pressure range and all. That is why I told you we are operating in another domain with respect to Rayleigh number, so that you can almost neglect the effect of laminar flow effects or viscosity effects. Viscosity is there, but it is quite insignificant compared to the driving force. Okay. Now let me concentrate how you can mechanize it. You consider this equation. Here, what are the variables? Because our entire purpose is to change the flow rate. Here, Q we have to modulate depending on our requirement. Because this is it should be a controlled flow which has to be injected into an actuator, controlled flow. Is there any element which is in our hand so that you can change it and control this? CD discharge coefficient, that is a constant of the physical opening. That is a constant. A naught is the area of the restricted area orifice. Delta P is the not the controlled quantity. Delta P is the effect of flow, and rho is the density. So here there is nothing variable, but there is one mechanical parameter which can be made variable through appropriate design of the orifice. Here A naught is a fixed area orifice. If we can make it as a variable area orifice, then we are done. That is the mechanism here. Only thing I am
So one doubt. So
Yeah.
can you once again explain like why can't we vary the delta P?
said delta P here now I am coming to the point. See, delta P is due to something called reaction. For example, delta P contains two components. One is P1 here, another is P2 here. Okay. P2 component is the effect of flow here. Okay. It is the effect. It is, even though P1 is in our hand, P2 is not in our hand. It is the effect of the flow rate here, cause. Because of that, we cannot modulate delta P as it is. P1, if we can modulate, let us do it. But normally what will happen is, P1 is a constant pressure head supplied by a pressure source. That also we will not, then if you want to modulate P1, now we have to think about some other mechanism. The basic idea of flow control valve is there is a constant pressure head, hydraulic pressure head, like our VCC in our electronic circuit, supply DC supply voltage. And how you can change some resistive path to change the current. That is a question here. Similar to that, we are having a DC source volt pressure, how we can change some resistance of the path so that the flow rate can be changed. And P2 is corresponding to the something like voltage drop in the downstream. That is an effect. So what we are going to do is A naught, we are going to make it as a rectangular orifice, and we are going to find a mechanism, a simple mechanism by means of which one parameter of the area, the width of the port, we can change. Consider this. This is a cylinder and it is having a slot on the surface of the cylinder. This can called as a rectangular slot, although there is a curvature here. And there is a piston. This piston head is there. This is the piston rod. And normally it is some special names are there. This is called a spool valve as it is. And the cylinder is called spool. And the piston is called spool land. And the rod is called spool rod. And this is the port. This is called hydraulic port. And this is rectangular in shape, so we call it as rectangular port. Now some more parameters. The displacement of the spool land with respect to its neutral position. And what is neutral position? Neutral position is the position where this is exactly this is closing. Now we assume that the port width, this is the port width, is same as the land width. This is the spool land width and spool port width, both are same. So if the port is exactly closed by the spool land, that position we call it as XV equals 0, the reference position. And the moment you push the spool rod, what will happen is some portion of the rectangular port will get open. And if you connect a fluid pressure source here with a pressure of P1, what will happen? The fluid will come out through this rectangular small port and escape. And assume that we are connecting some sort of pipe also here. I have shown here. This is a cross-section, same cross-section diagram. I have moved this spool land by displacement XV, and whatever the opening from this rectangular port connecting to a pipe, and the pressure, downstream pressure is nothing but the pressure P2 here. So P1 to P2, there is a flow. And one more term called W is known as the width of the port, the overall width. And XV is the displacement of the port, so that the opened area is equal to W into XV. That's what I read. Orifice area now it is equal to area of uncovered part of the rectangular port equals W into XV, where W is the this overall width. XV is the open. Now we are ready to apply the previous formula. What we have written here. CD A naught square root of 2 delta P by rho. Instead of A naught, we will substitute WXV. So CD WXV into square root of 2 delta P by rho. And hence Q, the flow rate through the spool valve, is equal to CDW and delta P. Okay. Is clear this particular concept?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The diagram is a bit difficult to visualize. If you could show some picture or little model.
And this is what is the problem. This is a cylinder. Uh, if you see the cross section here, what I am doing is I am taking a cross section at this point. Here, if you are taking a cut cross section, what you will see is this one only. Because your
Yes.
electronics engineers, some little bit of difficulties there.
Sir, you mean to tell the W is like measuring into the paper, the value of W, like in the second
Yeah.
diagram where we show a cross section.
Ah,
XV is shown as the parallel to the screen, and W you mean that it is going into the screen, right?
yeah, W is the length of this port along the surface of the cylinder. This one, this much. I will
So
mark
it's
here. Say here I will
okay.
mark
Yeah.
this much. This is the width W.
Yes, sir. So if we just interpret it in the second figure that you have shown the cross section, it's like it's going into the page.
Ah,
The
correct.
W.
Into the page. Into the page.
Okay, sir.
Okay. If you understood this, now I am adding some more complexity. Here, the only problem is the flow is having only one direction. We are applying a large pressure here and small pressure here, and the flow rate is only one direction. But normally for actuators, we should have control over a bidirectional flow. Hence, more than one number of such ports we are going to put it in cascade in tandem so that we will get a single spool driven but multiple ports simultaneously opening and closing so that we can mechanize it into a bidirectional valve, and such a valve is called servo valve. The servo is normally associated with bidirectional position control system that requires bidirectional flow control. So it's the basic name. Instead of spool valve, we are converting into servo valve, and it is bidirectional. And this will have 3 LANs and 4 port. 3 LAN means this is the first LAN, this is the second LAN, this is the third LAN. 3 LAN and 4 ports are there. This is the port number 1. This is port number 2. This is port number 3. And this is port number 4. I have accordingly marked Q1, Q2, Q3 and Q4. And all the LANs are connected on a single spool rod and they move simultaneously. I will show how this act to control a bidirectional motion of an actuator. That's why I connected a hydraulic actuator also along with this. You can see this actuator. This actuator is very simple when you come to electro-hydraulic system. Unlike your motor, there is multiple permanent magnets, coils, winding. It's a very complex mechanism. We have to sense the location of the permanent magnet with respect to coils. Then we have to switch the direction of current, etc. But here it is very easy. This is a simple cylinder piston. This is a cylinder and this is a piston. And piston rod is passing through this. And the body of the cylinder is attached to some rigid frame. Suppose we are connecting it to actuate the control surface of an aircraft. You might have seen while the aircraft is flying, some actuators are deflecting the aileron control surface. Then the actuator will have 2 parts. One is its reference. Another is the moving end. In that sense, if you consider this as a hydraulic actuator, its moving end is nothing but connected to the piston, and the cylinder is supposed to be the reference, and the cylinder is connected to the aircraft body. This represents the aircraft body or fuselage through some flexibility. Everywhere some flexibility is there. So whatever flexibility is there in between the cylinder of the actuator and the fuselage. Fuselage is also not a single point. It is a distributed thing. So better to say that the effective stiffness from the actuator body to the center of mass of the aircraft. Aircraft is a floating body. Okay. That you represent by KL1. Okay, coming back to this point. Now we are concentrating only on servo valve. Okay, what you have to understand is this is a fixed cylinder, and the piston head is connected to the control surface. This is a cross section of control surface. It is able to move like this. And our requirement is the piston head should be able to push the control surface forward, or it should also be able to pull back the control surface in the reverse. That is a servo action. Bi-directional motion should be possible. And this is a hinge point here. Now this bidirectional motion is possible only if we are injecting flow, pressurized fluid flow in this direction in one case, and the flow in the other fluid should be taken out. There is one operation. That is I am showing by here. From PS, the supply source, pressurized fluid should come as Q1, and it will come through this. It will push the piston cylinder. Then on the other side, fluid is pushed through Q3 to some return path. It goes to some reservoir. A collecting fluid is collected in a sump that is called reservoir. Then from reservoir, fluid will be again taken and pressurized through a pumping mechanism and supplied at the source again. So we have to make use of a pumping mechanism if you have to circulate this fluid indefinitely. But if it is only a small duration application, no problem. It can be put in a sump, and the supply source also will have sufficient quantity of pressurized fluid so that for the complete operating time it can supply the pressurized fluid. But if it is running indefinitely, definitely you should have a return path should be there, and there should be a pumping mechanism should be there. Through the pumping mechanism should pumped back to the supply side. Thus, we have seen how we can complete the circuit of flow, hydraulic flow, for positive displacement. Now, for negative displacement, you have to take back. Then, the supply flow will be as given by Q4. It will come here, and the flow will come through this and pressurize this piston, and the return path will be like this, and the return flow will return through this. Thus, there are two return ports to PR. One port is this, port number 3, and port number 2. For positive motion, the supply port is Q1 and return port is Q3. And for negative direction, opposite direction motion, the supply port is Q4 and return port is Q2. Why? For example, how you can activate Q1 and Q3? You simply push this spool rod. While you push the spool rod, what will happen? This clearance, this port will get opened. because this will move like this. This is a new position of the land. And this clearance that will get open. Similarly, here also, this also will move forward like this. And this will be open. But what will happen to Q2? This will move like this. So Q2 is getting more and more. This is not closed here. Q2 will get closed. Similarly, while you move this of this particular construction, at a time only one pair of ports will be opened. Out of that one pair, one will act as a supply port, another will act as a return port. In the negative directional motion, you have to pull this spool rod in the other direction so that the other pair will get opened. Out of that, Q4 will act as supply and Q2 will act as return. And this is the way in which we are able to provide controlled flow in both the directions through the same valve. And this is the concept of 3-LAN 4-port bidirectional servo valve. Understood? Any doubts on this?
Sir, so in the aeronautical terms, when they tell that there is a loss of hydraulic fluid in the aircraft, does it mean there is a breakage in any of the pathway or?
Aeronautical?
So in aeronautical terms, when they tell there is a loss of hydraulic fluid in the aircraft, does it mean that the mechanism by which the return of fluid is happening is get hindered or get broke down?
Okay, see, this is one of the basic problem with the hydraulic actuation system. You can see that a lot of joints, many things will be there. If there is any leakage in any path or valve, because we'll be connecting, now I am explaining only the simplest thing. There are so many other components should get added. Non-return valve, check valve, so many valves will be there. Each and every valve you are connecting, there will be joints will be there. So if there is any leakage, then the total flow, if goes outside, actually this is a closed circuit, as I told you know, now it is going to a reservoir. From the reservoir, it is pumped back to the supply chain. The total fluid in the total closed circuit should remain safe for faithful operation. So if there is some leaking through some joints, definitely the operation will be affected, and beyond certain level, it will not work. That is the reason, that is a term you are explaining with respect to fluid leaks.
Sir, and if it is too much sensitive, then why are they using it for almost all the control system in aircraft? They are using the hydraulic thing.
Yeah, there is partly it is a history. The main thing is not to generate large force, because you may be seeing surface are almost deflected in the full condition, and lot of these aerodynamic forces that is acting on the control surface, that is held by the actuator. But nowadays many aircrafts are using electromechanical only. But when the force levels are very large, then you have to go for electrohydraulic. For example, our fighter aircrafts, they are flying at you might have heard of a light compact aircraft of LCA of developed indigenously developed by India, that is Tejas. There, even though the aircraft, the fighter aircraft is quite small, but the force levels are of the order 10 ton force, etc. for the control surface. So holding it against the large pressure, that is very difficult if you realize it through a electromechanical actuator. There is a term called torque density for actuation system, that is the force per unit mass of the actuator. More clearly, force per unit mass of the motor. That is a term used in torque motor. So there is an upper limit for the torque density achievable through electromechanical actuator. That is one of the reasons why we go for electro-hydraulic thing. Another example I will explain while we come to the simulation, that is related to stiffness of the actuator. You may be seeing our JCBs, bulldozers, they are all using hydraulic actuator, not electromechanical actuator. There is a specific term called servo stiffness that I will explain while we study on the mathematical model. Now it is too early to explain. Another importance of advantage of electro-hydraulic actuator is, you see the moving part of the actuator is only a simple piston and piston rod, and you can make the mass of this moving part quite small as long as we are able to maintain the rigidity. And another thing, there is no gear system between the load and the moving part of the motor. They are directly connected. So the reflected inertia of the motor is same as the actual inertia when you reflect with respect to the load side. But if you consider our electromechanical actuator, now you have simulated, you have seen that the reflected inertia is the gear ratio square times it comes. So even though the moment of inertia of the motor rotary parts are quite small, and if the gear ratio is 100, then 100 square, that is 10,000 times the moment of inertia of the moving parts of the motor will come in the load side. That creates another problem. So these are all the important thing. Another example, very good example, you might have seen the robots made by Boston Dynamics, Big Dog, Atlas, Humanoid, etc. Have you seen the animation and all?
Yes, sir.
It's available. They are using hydraulic actuator. The basic reason is what I just now told. It is called the mechanical impedance point of view. When it goes and hit an environment, the impedance, inertial impedance point of view, hydraulic system, actual systems are quite less compared to electromechanical system. These terms you will understand when you come to control part. So these are the reason why we go for this sort of mechanism. And another thing, nowadays, another importance for legged robots is using regenerative actuators. That is, we want to store the impact energy and then retrieve it back. This sort of mechanisms are very good for controlled storage of impact energy. So if you study it well, it will not be a waste. It is now being used in advanced robotics as well as high power, high velocity system. For high velocity system or high acceleration systems, the inertia of the moving element should be much small. That is guaranteed in hydraulic system, unlike the electromechanical motor-based system. I hope you understood.
Yeah, okay, sir.
Okay. You will not understand fully. You will understand only after we do the complete simulation and modeling of this actuation system. Then you will enjoy it. Okay. Then you can come back and compare electromechanical versus electro-hydraulic actuation system. Okay, now you are listening for more than 1 hour. I know it is difficult for you. So I will, because here again, some more complex. We will take it in the next class. You, isn't it? I don't have any problem, but I feel you have problem because staring on the screen and all for quite a long time. Okay.
Sir,
So
I wanted to ask, is there always a steady flow through the actuator of the liquid?
no, a steady flow is not required. For example, see, what is a servo system? We want to hold this control surface at a particular orientation. Huh? If you want to hold, what will happen? You have to hold this only. For holding, we require only pressurized trapped fluid on both sides. There is no requirement for continuous flow coming in. So once you pressurize the forward chamber with sufficient flow, then you can close the servo valve so that the fluid will get trapped and have a large pressure P1 and a small pressure P2, so that P1 minus P2 into area of cross section of the piston will give a constant force. This is another benefit of electro-hydraulic actuator, because for holding with a force, no power is required. What is power? Pressure into fluid flow rate is the fluid power. For holding, no fluid flow is required, only pressure is required. But you consider the electromechanical case. For holding, we require torque. Torque is proportional to current. So for holding the load, you have to inject a large current through the motor coil, which will lead to Joule's laws, Ohm's I square R heat dissipation in the coils of the armature. In that sense, hydraulic system is better if you want to hold it. But if you move it, that benefit is lost. Okay.
Sir, actually, in the diagram you have written like V1, P1 and V2, P2 in that. So I was thinking if there is always a steady flow of liquid through that.
Okay, say for explaining diagram, I am putting diagram in a general case. Here I am not telling that it is the steady state position. In a dynamic condition only, I have written this diagram. So, what diagram point of view, it is correct only. I am not telling it is.
So there is no kind of steady flow throughout the whole system.
Say if you want to keep the load perfectly stationary, and if there are no leakage across different paths, then the flow through any path is zero.
Okay.
But both the statements are not correct. Even while aircraft is moving in a steady flight, that is generally called trim condition, even then there is small corrective if you look on the control surface of the aircraft while you are flying in a steady flight, you can see that small jittering is there. The jittering is actually the small actuations about the null position. That only keeps the aircraft in a steady condition. So never it is perfectly stationary. Another is always there will be fluid leakage paths. So both these things will contribute to always a finite flow and hence a finite pressure loss. Power loss. That will be there.
Well, sir, if that is the case, I thought that the displacement, suppose the displacement of the control surface will not be related to any extent to xv.
It is not the displacement, it is the velocity of the control surface is related to the flow rate.
The velocity, the initial
XV,
velocity or some point of velocity.
See, XV is again different. XV is the displacement of the spool valve.
Okay.
Primarily, what we relate is the flow rate Q1 is directly related to the velocity of the piston, forward velocity piston.
But sir, that flow rate Q1 will not be constant.
Flow rate is a direct requirement with respect to the velocity.
Yeah,
What
but the
are
flow rate will not be constant if there is no steady flow.
Okay. Here, nothing is constant. Everything is dynamic variables.
Okay, so at what point of time are we talking about the flow rate related to XV related to the displacement to the velocity of the condenser?
Now, actually, you have to wait for some more. You can see down in the downstream how many slides are there. While you come across all these things, all the dynamic equations are going to come. So all your doubts will be clear only after I am covering this entire portion. So it is a complete dynamical system, and we are now deriving piecewise relationship of individual components. After that, we will assemble all such relationships together to form the total closed loop. Then only the equations, everything will be complete and over. Okay. Till the time you have to wait. I will send you these lecture notes. You can go through it. So come prepared in the next class to ask more questions so that I will explain better. Now it will be difficult for you to concentrate quite a long time because we are studying online, you know. And that's what I am stopping now today. I will send you this slide. Mr. Abhilash will send you. Then you can study and come back. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. I was under the impression it's a steady state system instead of a dynamic system.
No, it's nothing
That
is
was
studies.
So one doubt.
What is the doubt?
So from the previous lab.
Where?
So from the previous lab, I'm saying. Sir.
Previous lab. Oh, okay.
Yes,
What's
sir.
the doubt?
Yes, sir. Sir, in the step response, when we gave the command amplitude of 5%, in that case, when we like tried to plot it for 100 seconds, we were getting a spike in between. So how we can explain it, sir?
This is using your static, that stick slip friction. Friction model is there.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So using friction model only, you spike means a glitch sort of thing, sudden glitch and going.
No, sir, a sharp spike was there.
Yeah, sharp spike means what's the amplitude here? Normally, what will happen is if the friction model is not proper, this sort of behavior can occur. But you know, the final model we used is called stick slip friction model. That means that if you use some sort of integral control, this actuator will stick to certain time, then slip suddenly, again it will stick. That is called stick slip model. That will not be a spike in the motion, but will be a step change from one steady state to another steady state. If it is a spike, without seeing your model, I cannot say that. So you can probably send your result, then only I can comment.
Sir, can I
Yes,
share
sir.
the screen?
Yeah, you do that. I will stop share.
Sir, this kind of spike is coming.
Actually, this is not. This is for 5%, right?
Yes, sir.
And you are using PI control. Integral control is there.
Yes, sir.
Is there. Okay. So this is a phenomena if you use integral control, and what is really happening is the friction will have a stick slip sort of behavior I told you. Here, this was initially caught up within the stiction zone. After that, what will happen is there was a small steady state error. That error will get integrated, and the control command will increase. When the control command increase, the motor torque will increase, and there is a point at which the motor torque will exceed the maximum stiction force. Then what will happen? It will move. But while it move, it will be little bit over motion will be there because of again the integral control is there. Suddenly it cannot correct it back. Then gradually it will be took back. So this is a problem of using integral control along with a friction dominated system. So what you can try is you remove your integral control and see still this is happening. Okay.
Okay, sir. So, sir, we can like take it as an inference that we can't, like, we should avoid using integral controllers with the friction
Correct.
systems.
Integral
Okay.
control, there is one problem. Integral control, one disadvantage with electromechanical systems with friction is this sort of limit cycling behavior or chattering, a stick slip phenomena will happen. In such case, it is not a good solution. So what you have to do is you have to go for friction compensation. Here PS4 actuator is having something larger value of friction. If you compensate a friction dominant system using a PID control with integrator, this sort of problem will occur. And another solution is, one more solution is there, the integrator state. You are using integrator an explicit limit. If you there is a limit for the integrator state, that limit you reduce. That is another way to reduce the amplitude of such problems. That also you can see. And the final ultimate solution is either don't use integral compensator, then steady state error will be there. Then we have to use high gain compensator. Because when we avoid one thing, there will be another problem. You have to increase the gain of the control. Otherwise, you have to make use of explicit friction compensation. Either there is a scheme called friction observer or model-based friction, or if nothing works, there is something called torque feedback control loops. That is the ultimate solution for friction compensation. Okay, you can play around. So in order to troubleshoot this, you simply remove the friction. You see that it is going, or you remove the integrator. Then you see that it is going. Then with this, then you can play around and understand why this is happening. And you are writing program in MATLAB. You have hold on each and every block, do it and understand it. And all the states are in your hand. There is a command called keyboard command. I hope all of you are familiar with keyboard command in MATLAB. Keyboard command you are using?
No, sir.
No or yes?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Then no should become yes. Keyboard spelling is same as the keyboard normal keyboard spelling. You find the help, you give help keyboard. This is the command which is useful for troubleshooting. That is at any line, on any line, if you simply type keyboard and execute, the execution will come and stop there. Then all the parameters so far will be accessible to you. You can see the intermediate values. You can understand what is happening at that particular point. why an error message comes. So this is a very important thing for MATLAB programming. So whatever doubts, whenever you want to see what is happening, and to understand on which line the problem is happening, there also you can key keyboard to multiple lines and understand up to what level it is working, beyond what level it is not working. Such things are also very important. You can simply type keyboard and exercise this thing with respect to this problem. Okay.
Yes, sir. So one more doubt.
Yeah.
So in the lab sheet, it was written that like plus minus 4 degrees equivalent to plus minus 4 into 398 into pi by 180 radians. So
Yeah.
where does that 398 factor comes from?
Okay, 398 is the gear ratio. That is, if the prime mover is the electromechanical motor, and the final end is the gimbal, the rocket gimbal. So 398 is if you are rotating the rocket engine about its gimbal point by one full rotation, then the attached motor of the actuator will rotate 398 times. That is the ratio.
Okay, sir.
Okay, that is the ratio, 398. But you will not rotate the engine by one full rotation. You will rotate only between plus or minus 4 degree. So correspondingly, 4 plus 4, 8 degree is the total into 398 degree. Now you have to convert in terms of number of rotation. That is 4 degree divided by 360 degree. Okay, that much of rotation, fractional rotation multiplied by 398. That many rotations will happen in the actuator.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay. See you next time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.